She survived the fire, the silence, and the pain, and raised her children far from any prying eyes. Years later, she joined the company of the man who tried to kill her, using a different name and a different voice. On stage, she revealed everything: her name, the evidence, and the truth that burned his world to the ground for good. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The soft morning light filtered through the gaps in the crocheted curtains, drawing golden stripes on the bedroom floor. Sarah woke up that June morning with the same feeling that had been with her for 2 months, a gratitude so deep it ached in her chest, tightened her throat, and made her eyes sting before she even fully opened them. Lying in the simple bed of the small apartment in the Maplewood Park neighborhood of Chicago, she slowly turned her head to the side and gazed at the 2 light wood cribs set against the wall. Michael and Gabriel were sleeping peacefully, bundled in the blue knit blankets she had made herself during the endless nights of her pregnancy, when the fear of losing them wouldn't let her sleep. They breathed slowly, rhythmically, in sync, as if still connected by the invisible cord that had joined them in her womb for 7.5 months of pure tension and hope. Premature, fragile. Too small for the world out there, but alive. Completely, miraculously alive. Sarah lay there for a few minutes, just watching. It was a ritual she repeated every morning since bringing them home. She needed to see their chests rise and fall. She needed to be sure it wasn't a dream, that they were really there, breathing, existing, taking up space in the world. After so many years of waiting, so many failed attempts, so many negative results that broke pieces of her soul, those 2 boys were living proof that it was worth insisting, that it was worth believing when everything seemed impossible. Sarah got up slowly without making a sound, stepping on the floorboards she already knew by heart, knowing exactly where to step to avoid the creaks that might wake them. She walked to the cribs with her heart tight with so much love. She leaned over and lightly touched Michael's warm, little forehead, feeling the soft, perfect skin, smelling that unmistakable newborn baby scent that she sometimes thought should be bottled so it would never be lost. Then she touched Gabriel's forehead, just as warm, just as perfect. They were identical. The same almond-shaped eyes that blinked slowly when they were almost awake. The same little button nose she had kissed 1,000 times. The same pink fingers that opened and closed as they dreamed of whatever 2-month-old babies dream of. The same round cheeks she would gently squeeze just to see that involuntary little smile that sometimes appeared. She still couldn't completely believe they were hers, that after so many years of trying, so many visits to fertility clinics, so many tests, so many hormone injections that left her body sore and her mind exhausted, so many tears shed in cold doctors' offices and in lonely pre-dawn hours when the whole world seemed to be pregnant except for her, they were finally here, real, tangible, hers. They were no longer just a promise, a wish, a fragile hope she carried in her chest, afraid it would disappear if she breathed too hard. They were flesh, bone, pulsating life. She was 36 when she finally got pregnant. 7 years of marriage to Ethan, 5 years of desperately trying to have a child, 3 painful losses that nearly destroyed her from the inside out, that made her question everything about herself, her body, her worthiness to be a mother. The first loss happened at 6 weeks. She hadn't even told anyone yet, just Ethan. She woke up in the middle of the night with terrible cramps and bleeding. In the ER, the doctor said it was common, that it happened, that she could try again, but for Sarah it wasn't common. It was devastating. It was like losing a part of herself she didn't even know existed, until it was there, growing inside her. The second loss was at 9 weeks. This time she had already told her mother, her closest friends. She had already started dreaming of names, of the baby's room, of what it would be like to hold that little face for the first time. When she lost it, she felt like she had failed, that her body had failed, that she wasn't strong enough to protect the life she was trying to create. Ethan tried to console her, but Sarah shut down. She spent weeks in silence, just going through the mechanical routine of waking up, working, coming home, sleeping. The third loss was the hardest. It was at 14 weeks. She was starting to believe again. She had already had the anatomy scan. She had seen the baby moving. heard the strong heartbeat, chosen the name, Laura. When the pains started, Sarah knew what was coming. At the hospital, crying so hard she could barely breathe, she begged the doctors to do something. But there was nothing to do. Laura was stillborn. Sarah held her daughter in her arms for a few minutes, looking at that small, perfect face that would never open its eyes. Ethan was beside her, but he seemed distant, as if he didn't know what to say, what to do, how to handle the enormous pain that filled the entire room. After that, Sarah considered giving up. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe she shouldn't force it. Maybe the universe was telling her that motherhood wasn't her path. But deep down, in the deepest part of her heart, she couldn't accept it. She couldn't let go of the dream. So she tried. One more time. One last time. And that's when it happened. On an ordinary day in October, 3 years ago, 2 lines appeared on the pharmacy test. 2 clear, unmistakable, unquestionable lines. Sarah looked, blinked, looked again, feeling her heart race, her hands tremble. She took another test, then another, and one more. She bought 4 different brands, all positive, all confirming what she barely dared to believe. When the ultrasound confirmed it was twins, 2 strong babies with hearts beating in sync, Sarah cried so much that the doctor had to stop the exam for a few minutes and ask her to take a deep breath, to calm down because he needed to measure the amniotic fluid, and she needed to stay still. But she couldn't stop. It was as if all the tears she had held back during the years of trying, all the disappointments, all the losses, were coming out at once, now mixed with a joy so immense it couldn't fit inside her. Ethan was beside her that day at the ultrasound. He held her hand, squeezed it tightly, kissed her forehead repeatedly, said it was a miracle, that they deserved it, that finally everything was working out. And it was. For Sarah, it was exactly that. A miracle built with faith tested to its limits, patience she didn't know she had, and an absurd dose of stubborn hope that refused to die even when all seemed lost. Sarah was a child psychologist. She worked with children who had been through deep trauma, unimaginable losses, situations of abandonment, neglect, emotional abuse. She knew how to truly listen, with an open heart and without judgment. She knew how to comfort without smothering. She knew how to turn pain into healing, fear into courage, silence into words. She had a rare ability to make children feel safe, to create a space where they could finally let their guard down and just be kids again. Her little patients adored her. Their parents would cry with gratitude during feedback sessions. Sarah had a gift for it, a true calling. But when it came to herself, her own pain, her own wounds that bled in silence, Sarah always had a brutal difficulty in allowing herself to feel completely. It was as if there was an unspoken rule inside her that said she had to be strong for everyone. Take care of everyone, hold everyone up except herself. She could care for broken children, but she couldn't fall apart. She could hold the hand of grieving mothers, but she couldn't admit that she was grieving too. Ethan used to say, back when they still had real conversations, that she was too generous with the world and too hard on herself. And maybe he was right. Maybe Sarah had forgotten at some point in her life that she also deserved the same compassion she offered to everyone around her. The apartment where they lived was modest, the kind real estate agents call cozy, to avoid saying small. 2 cramped bedrooms, a living room that also served as a dining room, a tiny kitchen where 2 people could barely move at the same time, a bathroom with a small shower stall, and a narrow balcony where Sarah had placed pots with mint, rosemary and basil because she believed plants brought life to spaces. It was in a simple 4-story building in the Maplewood Park neighborhood of Chicago, far from the bustling downtown, surrounded by quiet streets, old trees that provided generous shade in the summer, and a silence that during the week was broken only by the chirping of birds and the occasional sound of passing cars. It wasn't their dream apartment. It didn't have high ceilings, large windows, or luxury finishes. But it was what was possible. It was what they could afford on their salaries. And Sarah, with her almost magical ability to transform spaces, had turned that apartment into something much bigger than it was. She had turned it into a home. She dedicated time, attention, and care to every corner. She sewed crocheted curtains using a pattern her maternal grandmother taught her before she passed away, choosing beige and white, threads that let the light in softly. She bought colorful pillows at thrift stores and craft fairs, each with a different pattern, a different story. She hung frames on the walls with inspirational quotes she had printed, framed, and painted herself. Words about new beginnings, about strength, about believing when everything seems impossible. She placed a fluffy rug in the living room, bought on an installment plan, where she did yoga on the mornings she managed to wake up before everyone else. She organized the kitchen shelves with glass jars she labeled by hand. She planted the herbs on the balcony. She hung light curtains in the bedrooms. Everything thought out, planned, executed with an almost reverent care. Everything done to transform that cramped space into something that breathed comfort. When the twins were born prematurely and had to stay in the NICU for 3 weeks that felt like 3 years, Sarah reorganized everything again, driven by an almost desperate need to prepare the perfect nest for when she could finally bring them home. The second bedroom, which had been her makeshift office where she saw her little patients twice a week, became the baby's room. She spent entire days painting the walls a light blue, a soft shade reminiscent of a morning sky, using rollers and brushes she bought herself, refusing Ethan's offer to hire someone. She wanted to do it with her own hands. She wanted every brushstroke to carry her love, her intention, her promise that this would be a safe, welcoming space, full of affection. She assembled the wooden cribs side by side, carefully following every instruction in the manual, tightening every screw, testing every joint 2-3 times to be absolutely sure it was sturdy. Safe. She hung a mobile of silver stars from the ceiling, which spun slowly whenever someone passed by and accidentally touched it. She bought diapers of all sizes, stacking them neatly in a white second-hand dresser that she restored herself, sanding, painting, and changing the knobs. She bought bottles, a sterilizer, a changing pad, tiny clothes in shades of blue, white, and yellow, onesies that looked like they belonged to a doll, they were so small, socks that fit on her finger, hats that weighed less than a feather. Everything bought with her salary, penny by penny, because Ethan had been saying he was having financial difficulties at work, that things were complicated, that he needed to cut back on spending, or at least that's what he said. Sarah didn't question it. She just did what needed to be done the way she could. Ethan worked in business consulting. He was smart, articulate, and knew how to sell himself. He always had a knack for winning people over. When Sarah met him at a seminar on emotional management in the workplace, she was impressed by the way he spoke, secure, confident. He seemed like someone who knew exactly what he wanted from life. And she, at that time, was lost. She had just gotten out of a turbulent relationship, was questioning her own career, feeling like nothing made sense. Ethan appeared like an answer, like someone who could guide her back on track. In the beginning, it was good. He was attentive, affectionate, present. He would call during the day just to see how she was. He brought flowers for no reason. He planned weekend getaways. Sarah felt seen, cared for. And when he proposed, in a simple but meaningful restaurant, she said yes without hesitation. But the years passed and something changed. Ethan started to become more distant. He spent hours on his phone, always with ready excuses. Meetings that ran late into the night, last-minute business trips. Sarah tried to understand. After all, he worked a lot. He supported the family. Or at least, that's what she wanted to believe. But deep down, in a place she preferred not to visit, there was an unease, a feeling that something didn't add up. When she got pregnant, Ethan seemed happy. He celebrated, posted on social media, told everyone. But Sarah noticed his excitement was different from hers. It was as if he were playing a role, a performance. He smiled in the photos, but his eyes didn't. He would hug her belly, but his hand was cold. Sarah tried to ignore these details. After all, she had waited so long for this. She couldn't let silly doubts ruin the most important moment of her life. The pregnancy was difficult. At 28 weeks, Sarah started having contractions. She was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said the babies needed to stay in the womb for at least a few more weeks, otherwise the risks would be too great. She spent 10 days in the hospital on bed rest, immobile, praying that Michael and Gabriel would hold on. Ethan would show up at the hospital now and then. He'd stay for half an hour, constantly checking his phone, saying he had to deal with work stuff. Sarah understood, or pretended to. The twins were born at 32 weeks, small but fighters. They stayed in the NICU for 3 weeks. Sarah practically lived at the hospital. She spent the entire day beside the incubators, talking to them, singing softly, placing her hand on the glass as if she could transmit strength through her touch. Ethan came less often. He said he couldn't stand to see his sons like that it was too hard for him. Sarah accepted it. After all, everyone deals with fear in their own way. When they finally brought the babies home, Sarah felt like her life had started over. Everything made sense again. Waking up in the middle of the night to breastfeed, changing diapers, rocking both of them at the same time, singing off-key lullabies. It was tiring, exhausting, but it was also the most beautiful thing she had ever experienced. It was pure purpose. Ethan, however, seemed increasingly absent. He slept on the couch, saying he needed to rest because the babies cried so much. He left early, came home late. When he was home, he was glued to his phone. Sarah tried to talk to him a few times, but he always deflected. He said he was stressed with work, that things were complicated, that she needed to be more understanding. And Sarah tried because that's what she always did. Be understanding, be patient, be strong. But that morning, as she made coffee and listened to the sounds of the twins starting to wake up in the next room, Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. It was an intuition that hammered away quietly, insistently, telling her there was something she wasn't seeing, something that was right under her nose, but that she refused to acknowledge. Ethan walked into the kitchen at that moment, already dressed, hair combed, smelling of expensive cologne. He grabbed a cup of coffee, drank it standing up, checked his watch. "I have to leave early today," he said, without looking at her. Sarah turned her head. "Meeting again?" Ethan nodded, still fiddling with his phone. "It's a big proposal. Could change everything for us." Sarah forced a smile. "That's great. We need it." He finally looked at her, but it was a quick, superficial glance. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Sarah replied. "Just tired." Ethan gave a half smile. "It'll get better. The babies will grow up, you'll get more sleep." She nodded, but she didn't believe him. It wasn't about sleep. It was something else. Something she couldn't name, but that weighed on her. Ethan left without a proper goodbye. Sarah heard the door close, the sound of the car starting downstairs, the noise of the engine, fading away. She stood in the kitchen alone, looking at the coffee cup he had left on the counter. It was still almost full. He hadn't even really drunk it. The twins started to cry in the bedroom. Sarah took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron, and went to them. Michael was hungry. Gabriel had a dirty diaper. She picked them both up, one on each arm, and started to rock them. The routine went on autopilot: feed, change, rock, sing, repeat. The day passed like all the others, slow, tiring, full of the little details only. A mother understands. In the afternoon, Sarah managed to get them both to sleep at the same time and took the opportunity for a quick shower. When she came out of the bathroom, Ethan's phone was vibrating on the bed. She glanced at the screen. A message. The name flashed quickly before the notification disappeared. Julia. Sarah felt her stomach turn. Julia. She knew that name. She was a co-worker of Ethan's. He had mentioned her a few times, said she was competent, dedicated, ambitious. Nothing major, nothing that raised any flags. But something about the way the name appeared on the screen bothered Sarah. It was the quickness, the intimacy, the lack of a last name. She picked up the phone. The screen was locked. She tried the password Ethan always used. Wrong? He had changed it. Sarah frowned. Since when did he change his password? She put the phone back down and tried to calm herself. It was nothing, it was probably work. Julia must have been sending a document, a report, nothing more. But the unease didn't go away. It lingered, hammering, insistent. That night, Ethan came home late again, almost 10 o'clock. Sarah was on the couch, nursing Gabriel. Michael was asleep in the stroller beside her. Ethan came in, dropped his briefcase on the floor, let out a tired sigh. "Tough day?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. "Very," he replied, heading straight for the bedroom. Sarah finished feeding Gabriel, put both boys in their cribs and went to the bedroom. Ethan was lying down, still in his clothes, staring at the ceiling. "Aren't you going to have dinner?" she asked. "I'm not hungry." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, we need to talk." He closed his eyes. "About what?" "About us. About you. You're distant. You're different." Ethan sighed deeply. "Sarah, I'm tired. I work all day to support this family. You can't be on my case all the time." "I'm not on your case. I'm just saying I miss you. The boys need you too." "I know," he said, irritated, "but I can't be in two places at once. Someone has to pay the bills." Sarah felt tears burn in her eyes, but she held them back. "I work too, Ethan. I help too." He turned his face to her. "Help? You see 3 patients a week at home? That doesn't even pay the electric bill." The words cut deep. Sarah froze. Ethan had never spoken to her like that. He had never belittled her work. She stood up slowly, without answering, and left the room. She went to the living room, sat on the couch, and let the tears fall. Silent, discreet, like everything in her life had always been. In the middle of the night, while nursing Michael, Sarah glanced at Ethan's phone, which he had left on the coffee table. The screen lit up on its own. Another message from Julia. This time Sarah managed to read it before it disappeared. "Miss you." Her heart pounded. "Miss you." It wasn't work, it wasn't a document. It was nothing professional. Sarah put Michael back in his crib and returned to the living room. She picked up Ethan's phone, tried the new password. Wrong again. Tried another combination. Nothing. She put the phone down and stood there, trying to breathe. She knew. Deep down she had always known. But admitting it was different. Admitting it meant that everything she had built, everything she had believed in, was a lie. The following days were a silent torture. Sarah watched Ethan, with different eyes. She noticed the details, the different cologne, the messages he deleted quickly, the calls he took outside, the excuses that didn't add up. She thought about confronting him, but she was scared. Scared of hearing the truth, scared of losing what was left, scared of raising her children alone. So she pretended everything was fine, pretended she didn't see, pretended she believed. Until one afternoon, Ethan came home early. He seemed nervous. He paced back and forth, fiddled with his phone, looked at Sarah with a strange expression. "Did something happen?" she asked. "No," he answered, too quickly. "Just worried about some business deals." Sarah didn't press, but she felt something was different, something in the air, a tension she couldn't identify. That night, Ethan went out again, said he had to take care of something, that he'd be back in 20 minutes. Sarah nodded, picked up the twins and went to the kitchen to make some tea. She needed to calm her nerves. She needed to think. She put the kettle on the stove, settled Michael and Gabriel in their double stroller beside her. They were awake, looking at her with their curious little eyes. Sarah smiled at them. "You two are the best thing that ever happened to me," she whispered. That's when she smelled it. Gas, strong, unmistakable. Sarah frowned. She looked at the stove. It was off. She looked behind her. The smell was coming from somewhere else, from the pipe. She ran to the wall, tried to turn off the valve. It wouldn't turn. It was loose. Her heart raced. She grabbed the babies, ran to the front door. Locked. She hadn't locked it. She tried the key. It didn't work. The lock was jammed, locked from the outside. Sarah ran to the window, tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. It was sealed, shut tight. Panic took over. She banged on the glass, screamed, begged. No one answered. The building was empty. The neighbors were out of town. She was alone. The smell of gas grew stronger. Sarah felt her head spin. The The babies started to cry. She held them tight against her chest, trying to protect them, trying to think, trying to understand. And then, through the fogging window, she saw him, Ethan, standing on the sidewalk, and next to him a woman, young, pretty, blonde. They were looking. Up at the apartment, Ethan was holding something in his hand, keys. Sarah pounded on the glass with all her strength. She screamed his name, pleaded, cried. Ethan didn't move. The woman beside him smiled, and Sarah understood. He knew. He had planned it. This wasn't an accident, it was a trap. The babies were crying desperately in her arms. Sarah fell to her knees, still holding them both, feeling the air grow heavy, her vision blur, her world collapse. She tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't respond. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come out. She looked at Michael and Gabriel, their little faces red from crying, and felt a pain that went beyond her body. It was the pain of knowing she couldn't save them, that everything she had fought for, everything she had dreamed of, was going to end here. But then, in the midst of the despair, in the midst of the fumes that were starting to fill the apartment, she heard a sound. Distant, muffled, a siren. Sarah didn't know where it was coming from. She didn't know if it was real or if her mind was playing tricks on her. But it was the only thread of hope she had. She clutched the babies tightly, crawled to the bathroom, closed the door, and stuffed wet towels under the crack. She sat on the cold floor, her back against the wall, placed Michael and Gabriel in her lap, and started to sing, softly, trembling. "Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop." Tears streamed down her face, her voice cracked, but she kept singing, because it was all she could do, it was all that was left. And as she sang, as she rocked her children against her chest, Sarah made a silent promise. If they survived, she would come back. She would come back to destroy the one who tried to destroy her. The sound of the siren grew closer, louder, more real. Sarah could hear it through the haze that was beginning to take over her senses. She was lying on the cold bathroom floor, the babies clutched to her chest, the wet towels still stuffed under the door. Her vision was blurry. Her head was heavy. Her lungs burned every time she tried to draw a breath. But there was something inside her, a fierce primal instinct that wouldn't let her give up. She couldn't pass out. She couldn't let go of the boys. She couldn't let Ethan win. She kept singing. Her voice was weak, trembling, almost inaudible. But she continued. "Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop." Michael was crying softly against her shoulder. Gabriel had his little eyes closed, his face red. Sarah kissed both their foreheads, whispering promises she didn't even know if she could keep. "We're going to be okay. Mummy's here. We're going to be okay." That's when she heard the noise, loud, crashing, wood being broken down, heavy footsteps, voices shouting commands. Then, someone banging on the bathroom door. "Is anyone in there? Can anyone hear me?" Sarah tried to answer, but her voice wouldn't come out. She tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't respond. She just held the babies tighter, as if that could protect them from whatever was coming. The bathroom door was kicked open with a violent blow. A man entered, tall, strong, wearing a firefighter's uniform and an oxygen mask. He looked at Sarah on the floor, at the two babies in her arms, and his eyes widened. "My God! Hang on, I'm getting you out of here." He took off his own mask and placed it over Sarah's face, holding it firmly. "Breathe. Take a deep breath. That's it. Again." The air hit her lungs like an icy stab. It hurt so much she wanted to spit it out, but the man held it firm. "Again. Keep breathing." Sarah obeyed. She drew in air, coughed, drew in more. Her vision slowly began to clear. She could focus on the man's face. He must have been in his 50s, with graying hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes. A face that had seen a lot. A face that knew exactly what to do. He carefully took Gabriel from her arms and handed him to another firefighter who had just entered. Then he took Michael. "Come on, can you walk?" Sarah nodded, but when she tried to stand, the world spun. The firefighter grabbed her arm, steadying her. "Easy, slowly, I've got you." They left the bathroom. The apartment was filled with a thick, suffocating smoke. Sarah could barely see a foot in front of her. The firefighter guided her step by step to the front door, which was now wide open, broken down. They crossed the building's hallway, went down the stairs. Each step was a monumental effort. Sarah stumbled twice, but the man didn't let her fall. When they finally reached the street, the cool night air hit Sarah's face like a slap. She fell to her knees on the sidewalk, coughing violently, her whole body shaking. Paramedics rushed to her, put an oxygen mask on her, checked her vital signs, asked questions she couldn't answer because her throat was on fire. "Where are my children?" she managed to ask, her voice hoarse, desperate. "Where are my babies?" "They're being treated. They're alive. Please, breathe." Sarah looked around, searching. For Ethan, for Julia. But there was no one on the sidewalk. The building was cordoned off, fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, but Ethan was gone, as if he had never been there. They took Sarah and the twins to the nearest hospital, Lakeside General Hospital, on the south side of Chicago. The ambulance sped through the city with sirens blaring, crossing empty streets in the cold June night. Sarah lay on the gurney, an oxygen mask on her face, a paramedic beside her constantly checking her vitals. She tried to turn her head to see the babies who were in another ambulance, but the paramedic told her to stay still, not to move, to save her energy. But how could she stay still? How could she not move when she didn't know if her children were okay, if they were breathing, if they would survive? The anguish was physical, squeezing her chest more than the smoke had. Every second without seeing Michael and Gabriel was torture. When they arrived at the hospital, it was a flurry of activity. The babies were taken straight to the NICU, surrounded by a team of pediatricians and nurses who rushed through the white, sterile hallways with the controlled urgency that only healthcare professionals can muster. Sarah was taken to the emergency room. The doctors examined her with meticulous attention. Eyes, throat, lungs. They took chest x-rays to check for lung damage. They drew blood to measure carbon monoxide levels. They started an IV drip, forcing fluids to flush out her system. She had inhaled a lot of smoke. Her lungs were irritated. Her throat was raw. But she was stable. There was no immediate danger of death. The babies were also stable. Tiny miracles breathing inside incubators, monitored second by second. Miraculously, against all odds, they were all alive. But Sarah could barely process the relief. Her head was full of questions, of images she couldn't shake. Ethan standing on the sidewalk, Julia beside him, the smile on her face, the keys in his hand. He knew. He had planned it. He had locked the door, sealed the windows, released the gas, left, stood outside, waiting for her to die, waiting for his children to die. How? How could someone she had loved, who had slept beside her for 7 years, who had promised to take care of her, who had sworn to be by her side in good times and bad, how could that man do such a thing? How could he look at his own children, 2-month-old babies who had barely begun to live, and decide they needed to disappear? Sarah was lying on the ER gurney, staring at the stained white ceiling, when the firefighter who saved her walked into the cubicle. He was no longer wearing his heavy uniform. He was in jeans and a simple t-shirt. He knocked lightly on the glass door. "Can I come in?" Sarah nodded. He approached, pulled up a plastic chair and sat beside the gurney. "How are you doing?" "Alive," Sarah answered, her voice still hoarse. "Thanks to you." He gave a tired smile. "Just doing my job. You saved my sons. You saved my life. That's much more than a job." The man was silent for a few seconds, as if deciding whether or not to say what was on his mind. Then he took a deep breath. "My name is Robert Miller. I've been a firefighter for 28 years. I've seen a lot in that time. Fires, building collapses, accidents. But what I saw tonight was different." "How so?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "When we got to the building, we weren't supposed to go in yet. Protocol says to assess the situation, check for safety, then start the rescue. But I heard a sound, a muffled cry, a baby, and something told me I couldn't wait. So I went in, against orders, against protocol, and I found you." Sarah felt tears burn in her eyes. "Thank you," I don't know how to thank you. Robert shook his head. You don't have to, but there's something you need to know. What? When I was approaching the building before I went in, I saw a man on the sidewalk with a woman. They were just standing there looking at the building. They seemed to be waiting for something. When I ran past them, I heard the man say to the woman, "By tomorrow morning, she and the babies will be gone. We can start over." Sarah felt her blood run cold. You heard that? I did, and I recorded it. He pulled a small recorder from his pants pocket. I always carry this with me. I use it to log incidents, make notes. When I heard what he said, I hit the button without thinking. It was instinct. Robert pressed play. Ethan's voice came out of the small device, clear, unmistakable. By tomorrow morning, she and the babies will be gone. We can start over. Sarah closed her eyes. It was real. It wasn't an impression, it wasn't paranoia, it wasn't a coincidence. Ethan had really tried to kill her and their children, and he had confessed without knowing he was being recorded. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because you need to know the truth, and because something very strange is happening. What? When we came out of the building with you and the babies, the investigators were already arriving. They went into the apartment, did their forensic work. They found 3 charred bodies in the living room, unrecognizable, and they assumed it was you and the twins. Sarah's eyes widened. What? But how? We're alive. They saw me. They saw the babies. Robert shook his head. I tried to explain. I said I had rescued a woman and 2 babies alive, but the chief of operations wouldn't listen. He said I was confused, that I must have inhaled smoke, that the bodies in the living room were unmistakable, a woman and 2 small children. So they closed the case, declared the deaths, and sent word to the husband. Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. They think I'm dead. Yes. And tomorrow morning, when the newspapers report the news, everyone will think the same thing. But why? Why didn't they check? Why didn't they come here to the hospital to verify? Because someone doesn't want them to know the truth, someone with influence, someone who managed to manipulate the investigation. Ethan, Sarah whispered. Probably. And if he thinks you're dead, he'll collect the life insurance, he'll get everything, and you officially will cease to exist. Sarah was silent, processing. Ethan had planned everything, the fire, the fraud, her death and the baby's deaths. And now, by some absurd twist of fate, by an investigator's mistake, he was going to get exactly what he wanted. She was dead, the babies were dead, and he was free to start over with Julia. What do I do? Sarah asked, feeling panic rise. Robert looked her in the eye. You have 2 options. First, you come forward now, report everything, show that you're alive, but without concrete evidence, it will be hard to prove it was attempted murder. He'll say it was an accident, that he didn't know, that he was desperate, and he'll probably walk free. And the second option? You disappear for real. You accept the death. You change your identity, you start from scratch. And while he thinks he's won, you gather evidence, you investigate, you uncover everything, until you have enough to destroy him. Sarah looked at Robert as if he were crazy. You're asking me to pretend I'm dead? I'm offering you a chance to survive and at the same time get justice. But the decision is yours. Sarah laid her head back on the gurney, staring at the ceiling. She thought of Ethan, of his fake smile, his lies, his betrayal, his murder attempt. She thought of Julia, smiling on the sidewalk, while she suffocated inside. She thought of her babies, innocent, who almost died because of greed and malice. And then, something inside her shifted. It was no longer fear, it was no longer pain. It was rage, pure, cold, calculated rage. Help me, she said, looking at Robert. Help me disappear. Help me find out everything. And when I have enough evidence, I'll come back, and I'll destroy them both. Robert nodded slowly. I'll help you, but you have to be ready, because from now on, Sarah doesn't exist anymore. You'll have to be someone else, live another life, until it's time to come back. I'm ready, Sarah said firmly, And so it was that on that June night, in a Chicago hospital, Sarah officially died, and another woman with another name, another ID, another story, was born in her place. Robert arranged everything. He had contacts, favors to call in, people who owed him. He got a fake birth certificate, a driver's license, a social security number. Sarah became Helen. Helen Costa, born in Portland, Oregon. Psychologist, single, no officially registered children. The twins were registered under Helen's name, with forged certificates stating they were born in an initially unregistered home birth. Everything was done carefully, with attention to the smallest details. 3 days later, Sarah was discharged from the hospital. Helen Costa rented a small apartment in Milwaukee, a neighboring city 2 hours from Chicago. She took the babies, started from scratch, bought new clothes, basic furniture, the essentials to survive. Robert helped her financially at first until she could get back on her feet. She promised she would pay back every cent one day. He said she didn't have to, but she insisted. It wasn't charity. It was an investment in revenge. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Ethan was crying on television. He gave interviews. He said he had left the house for 20 minutes to buy medicine for the babies, and when he returned, the building was in flames. That he tried to go in, but the firefighters wouldn't let him. That he lost everything, his wife, his children, his entire life. People were moved. They sent messages of support. They started a GoFundMe to help him. Ethan thanked them publicly, saying he would use the money to create a project in his family's memory. But what he really did was cash in the life insurance policy. $2 million, $1 million for his wife, $500,000 for each baby. He paid off all his debts, bought a new, bigger, more luxurious apartment, and 3 months later, he married Julia in a discreet but elegant ceremony at a resort in Miami Beach. Sarah, or rather Helen, watched everything from a distance. She saw the photos on social media, read the articles in the newspapers. She felt the anger grow with each new post, each new lie. Ethan and Julia built an empire. They opened a business consulting firm. They landed big contracts, important clients. They became leaders in their field. They gave talks on overcoming adversity, resilience, starting over. People admired them. They saw them as examples of those who managed to rise from tragedy. But Sarah knew the truth, and she spent the next few years gathering evidence with a patience she never knew she had. She worked methodically, like a private investigator, like an amateur detective driven by a purpose that went beyond anger. It was justice. It was survival. She investigated every one of Ethan's business deals with a magnifying glass, every contract he signed, every partner he made. She discovered subtle but devastating tax fraud. Shell companies created solely to divert money, tax evasion in amounts reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars, overpriced contracts with public companies, where he received kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. She discovered that Julia had an interesting history, 3 previous relationships with married men, all financially successful, all ending abruptly when the money ran out or when someone with more came along. She wasn't just a mistress, she was a predator. Calculating, she knew exactly how to choose her victims. Sarah uncovered offshore bank accounts, tax havens, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama, properties not declared to the IRS, a condo in Miami, a house in Portugal, a complex and well-architected money laundering scheme involving offshore companies, fictitious investments, and forged documents. Ethan had built a fraudulent empire, and no one suspected a thing. Everyone just saw the successful businessman, the man who rose from tragedy, and Sarah kept everything, every printed and scanned document, every audio recording of phone conversations she managed to intercept using monitoring apps, every photo of suspicious meetings, of encounters in expensive restaurants where illegal deals were sealed with discreet handshakes. She organized everything into physical and digital folders, categorized by type of crime, by date, by relevance. She prepared a complete dossier that any district attorney would love to have. She was building an irrefutable case, solid, undeniable. Meanwhile, she raised the twins alone, with a strength she had to invent every day. She worked hard, sometimes 3 shifts. She saw patients at home during the day, did online consultations at night, and worked as a freelancer writing psychological reports for the court system on weekends. She saved every penny that came in. She cut out everything that wasn't essential: clothes from thrift stores, second-hand toys, basic but nutritious food. Michael and Gabriel grew up healthy, happy, surrounded by love, even if money was tight. They didn't have the most expensive toys, but they had a present mother. They didn't live in a big house, but they had a home where they felt safe. And that, Sarah learned, was worth more than any fortune. The boys didn't know the truth about their father. Sarah told them their father had left when they were babies, that he wasn't ready to be a father, that it wasn't their fault, that some people just can't stay. It was a half-truth. It wasn't a lie. Ethan had indeed left, just not in the way they imagined. He hadn't just abandoned them. He had tried to erase their existence. But Sarah protected her children from this brutal truth. They would know one day, when they were older, when they could understand. For now they were just children who deserved to live without the weight of knowing their own father had tried to kill them. When the boys turned 5 and started attending school full-time, Sarah finally saw the opportunity she had been waiting for, the window that opened at the perfect moment. Ethan's company had a job opening: paralegal. Someone to organize complex contracts, file sensitive documents, and handle all the bureaucratic work that he and Julia didn't have the patience for. The position was advertised discreetly, only on specialized websites, because they wanted someone competent, but who wouldn't draw attention. Someone who would work behind the scenes. Helen Costa applied. She sent the impeccable resume that Robert had helped her build over the years: solid experience in corporate law, a postgraduate certificate in contract management, excellent references from companies Robert knew, where the managers agreed to lie, to say that Helen had worked there, to confirm her competence if anyone called to check. It was all a setup, all planned. She was called for an interview 3 days later. Sarah chose her outfit carefully: a discreet grey suit, hair tied back in a low bun. Reading glasses she didn't need, but that completely changed her appearance. Light, almost imperceptible makeup. She needed to look professional, competent, but above all invisible. She needed to be the type of person Ethan would look at every day without really seeing, and that's exactly what she achieved. Julia conducted the interview, sitting behind a glass desk in a modern conference room with white walls and abstract paintings. She was impeccable as always: blonde hair perfectly styled, manicured nails, designer clothes. She asked technical questions in a cold tone, evaluating each answer with calculating eyes, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, reasons to dismiss. Helen answered everything with confidence, calmly. She demonstrated knowledge. She demonstrated efficiency. She demonstrated exactly what they were looking for. At the end of the interview, Julia leaned forward. "Why do you want to work here?" Helen smiled, a professional, controlled smile. "Because I believe in the work you do. I've read your story about how you overcame personal tragedies and built this company. It's inspiring, and I want to be a part of something like that." Julia seemed to like the answer. "You're hired. You can start on Monday." Sarah left the interview with her legs shaking. It had worked. It had actually worked. She was going to work alongside the man who tried to kill her. She would see him every day. She would have access to all his secrets. It was risky, it was dangerous, but it was necessary. On her first day of work, when Helen walked into the chic office on the 15th floor of a glass-fronted commercial building in downtown Chicago, she saw Ethan for the first time in 5 years. He was sitting behind a huge dark wood desk, talking on the phone, gesturing with his free hand, laughing at something the person on the other end said. He was wearing a navy blue suit, an expensive tie, a luxury watch on his wrist. He was older, a few grey hairs at his temples, expression lines around his eyes. But he was still the same fake smile, the same air of someone who thinks they're better than everyone else, the same narcissistic energy she had ignored for years. He didn't look up when she entered. Julia introduced her quickly, almost as if it were an annoying formality. Ethan just nodded, distracted, mumbled a meaningless "Hi," and went back to his call. He didn't even really look at her face, and it was in that moment that Sarah was absolutely certain she would succeed. He didn't recognize her, 5 years apart. A change in hair color, weight loss, glasses, different clothes, a different posture. She had transformed into someone completely new, and he, so absorbed in himself, so convinced of his own victory, couldn't see what was right in front of him. Sarah stood there for a few seconds, looking at the man who tried to kill her, the man who killed the woman she used to be, the man who destroyed her entire life in one night. And she felt for the first time in 5 years that she was close, very close, so close she could taste the victory, the revenge she had meticulously planned in every detail, in every sleepless night while her boys slept, in every tear she swallowed so as not to fall apart in front of her children, was finally within reach. And she would not fail. She could not fail. She worked in silence, efficient, invisible. She collected documents Ethan left lying around, accessed files he thought were protected, copied contracts, emails, messages, recorded conversations, photographed papers, all carefully, all without raising suspicion. Ethan never recognized her. He looked at Helen every day and didn't see Sarah. He didn't see the woman he had tried to murder, whom he had left locked in a burning apartment, whom he had declared dead. To him, Helen was just another employee, useful but insignificant. Julia, however, was more observant. Sometimes she would look at Helen with a strange expression, as if something didn't add up, as if there was something familiar she couldn't place. But she never said anything. She just watched. 3 months after starting the job, Sarah had everything she needed: documents proving tax fraud, audio recordings confirming bribery, fake contracts, and, most importantly, the audio that Robert had recorded on the night of the fire. "By tomorrow morning, she and the babies will be gone. We can start over." Ethan's confession, clear, undeniable. It was time to come back, not as Helen, but as Sarah, as the woman who was supposed to be dead, but was very much alive, and ready to set fire to the life of the one who tried to set fire to hers. Sarah chose the moment carefully. The company was hosting a big event, a corporate dinner for investors, clients, partners. The press was confirmed, public. Officials would be present. The perfect event for a revelation. On the night of the dinner, Sarah got ready, not as the discreet, faded Helen, but as herself. An elegant dress, hair down, light makeup, and a silk scarf covering her neck, hiding the scars the fire had left on her skin. She entered the hotel ballroom, greeted a few people, took a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking. She waited. Ethan and Julia were in the center of the room, smiling, talking, shining. The perfect couple. The story of overcoming adversity. The example of success. When the master of ceremonies went on stage to thank everyone for coming, Sarah approached. She got on stage, took the microphone from the man's hand, who was left confused. "Excuse me," she said, her firm voice echoing through the hall. "I need to make an important announcement." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Ethan frowned, not understanding. Julia turned pale. Sarah removed the scarf. The scars appeared, irregular marks that ran from her neck to her jawline. Burn scars, unmistakable. "My name is not Helen Costa," she began, looking directly at Ethan. "My name is Sarah Miller. And I am not dead!" The room erupted in murmurs. Ethan went white. Julia took a step back, stumbling. "5 years ago, my husband tried to murder me. He locked me and our twin sons in an apartment, released the gas, sealed the exits, and stood outside waiting for us to die. But we didn't die. We were rescued. And while he was crying on television, pretending to be a victim, cashing in the life insurance policy, and starting a new life with his mistress, I was alive, rebuilding my life, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment." Ethan tried to speak but couldn't. Julia started to tremble. Sarah pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "On this flash drive is everything: documents proving tax fraud, money laundering, fake contracts, and an audio recording from the night of the fire, where my ex-husband confesses his plan. She plugged the flash drive into the hotel's computer, connected to the speakers. She pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, crisp, unmistakable. By tomorrow morning, she and the babies will be gone. We can start over. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos. Reporters running to ask questions, investors standing up furious, officials approaching. Julia started screaming, denying everything, saying it was a lie, that she knew nothing. Ethan stood paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to defend himself. And Sarah, in the center of that hurricane, finally felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace. The hotel ballroom exploded into controlled chaos. Reporters scrambled, cameras flicked on, and microphones were thrust in Sarah's direction. Investors shot up from their tables, faces red with anger, some already on their phones calling their lawyers. Public officials who were present, including a city councilman and 2 police detectives, approached the stage with grim expressions. The buzz of indignant voices filled every inch of the space. Ethan was frozen in the middle of the room, his face so white he looked like he was about to faint. His hands were visibly shaking, his mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. It was as if his brain had short-circuited, unable to process what was happening. The woman he had left for dead was here, alive, on stage, publicly destroying everything he had built over the last 5 years. It was impossible. It was a nightmare, but it was real. Julia, on the hand, reacted quickly. She had always been the smarter of the two, the more calculating, the one who thought fast in a crisis. She took 2 steps forward, her high heels clicking firmly on the marble floor, and screamed, her shrill voice cutting through the din. "This is a lie! She's lying! This woman is crazy! She's trying to extort us!" Sarah turned to face Julia, her eyes steady, fearless. "Crazy! I have documents. I have proof. I have an audio recording of your own voice, Julia, planning with Ethan how to split the insurance money. Should I play that? 1, 2. Julia went pale. Her mouth snapped shut. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected Sarah to have more than the audio from the night of the fire. She took a step back, stumbling in her heels. One of the detectives got on stage, flashing his badge. "Detective Evans, ma'am, you're going to have to come with me to give an official statement and bring all the evidence you claim to have." Sarah nodded. "I'm ready. I have everything documented. 5 years of investigation, tax fraud, money laundering, attempted murder. All of it proven." The detective signaled to 2 police officers who were at the event. "Place Ethan Miller and Julia Mendez in protective custody until we sort this out." Ethan finally reacted. He lurched forward, his voice hoarse and desperate. "No! This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know. It was an accident, I swear." Sarah stepped down from the stage, walking toward him. She stopped just inches away, looking him in the eye for the first time in 5 years without having to pretend. "An accident? You turned on the gas, you locked the doors from the outside, you sealed the windows, you stood on the sidewalk and watched. Which part of that was an accident, Ethan?" He looked away, unable to meet the intensity of her gaze. "Sarah, I was desperate. We were drowning in debt. Julia said it was the only way out." "So you admit it," Sarah said, her voice calm but cutting. "You admit you planned to murder your own wife and your own children for money." Ethan opened his mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. The words died in his throat. Around him, the circle of people closed in, faces of contempt, disgust, revulsion. He had lost. And he knew it. Julia tried to run. She spun around and bolted for the ballroom exit, her high heels making it difficult. But the officers were faster. They caught her before she reached the door, grabbing her by the arms. She struggled, screaming, crying, saying she hadn't done anything, that it was all Ethan's idea, that she was a victim too. Sarah watched the scene with a coldness that surprised her. She felt no pity, no compassion. She only felt the certainty that justice was finally being served. Julia had smiled on the sidewalk, while Sarah suffocated inside. She had planned, encouraged, benefited. She was no victim. She was a co-conspirator. The officers handcuffed them both. Ethan, head bowed, looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Julia kept screaming, her makeup streaked with tears, her hair a mess, her composure shattered. They were led out of the ballroom under the flash of cameras, the shouted questions of reporters, and the indignant murmurs of the guests. Sarah stayed in the ballroom for another 2 hours. She gave interviews, answered questions, showed documents to the authorities. Detective Evans took the flash drive with all the evidence, promising to investigate every detail. Sarah also handed over physical copies she had brought in a folder. Contracts, bank statements, transcribed audio, photos, everything organized chronologically, categorized by type of crime. One of the reporters, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a notebook full of notes, approached her. "My name is Paula from the Chicago Tribune. Can I ask you a few questions?" Sarah nodded, tired but willing. She needed her story to be told. She needed people to know the truth. "How did you manage to survive all these years?" Paula asked, her voice gentle. Sarah took a deep breath. "With focus, with purpose. I knew that if I gave up, if I surrendered to despair, Ethan would have truly won. So I woke up every day and chose to fight. For my children, for myself, for justice." "Do your children know?" "Not yet. They're 5. They'll know when they're ready. For now they just need to know that their mother loves them and will always protect them," Paula wrote quickly. "What do you want to happen now?" "I want Ethan and Julia to pay. Not just for what they did to me, but for all the other fraud they committed. They stole, they lied, they cheated. They built an empire of lies, and I want it all to come crashing down. And after justice is served?" Sarah smiled for the first time that night, a small but real smile. "After, I'm going to rebuild my life. For real this time. No lies, no fake identities. I'm going to be Sarah again, and I'm going to raise my children knowing I did the right thing." The interview was published the next day on the front page, taking up the entire cover with a photo of Sarah still on the hotel stage, the scars visible on her neck, her gaze firm and determined. The headline in bold letters read, "I came back from the dead to get justice." The case exploded nationally within hours. It wasn't just another crime story. It was a story of survival, courage, calculated revenge, and delayed justice that struck a deep chord with people. TV shows cancelled their regular programming to debate the case live. News anchors narrated every detail with emotional voices. True crime podcasts recorded special episodes, some 3 or 4 hours long, dissecting every aspect of the story. Social media buzzed with opinions, theories, and collective outrage. Hashtags like "Ois back for revenge" and "Justice for Sarah" hit the trending topics in minutes. Thousands of people shared the article, commented, debated. Influencers recorded videos talking about the case, many crying as they recounted the details. Lawyers technically analyzed the accusations in endless live streams. Psychologists talked about trauma, resilience, and the human capacity to rise again after the unimaginable. Sarah's story touched millions of people in different, but all profound ways. Women who had suffered domestic violence identified with her, seeing in her a reflection of their own pain and struggle. Many wrote letters, sent messages, telling their stories, thanking Sarah for having the courage to expose what so many lived through in silence. Mothers fighting alone to raise their children were inspired by her determination, by the way she didn't give up even when all seemed lost. Survivors of attempted murder saw in her the proof that it was possible to come back, rebuild, and demand justice. Her courage became a symbol, a banner, a movement. Ethan and Julia were taken to separate police stations immediately after their arrest. The Chicago Police Department headquarters held Ethan, while Julia was taken to a station specializing in crimes against women, ironically the same kind of place where many victims of domestic violence go for protection. During the initial interrogations, which lasted for hours and were conducted by experienced detectives with no patience for lies, both tried to deny everything. Ethan, with an arrogance still trying to cling on even in handcuffs, said the fire was a terrible accident, a tragedy that destroyed him from the inside, that he didn't know Sarah was home that night, that he had gone out to buy medicine for the babies at a 24-hour pharmacy because one of them had a fever, that when he returned 10-15 minutes later, the building was in flames and the firefighters wouldn't let him in. that he screamed, cried, begged, but couldn't save his family. It was a well-constructed story, rehearsed, probably repeated mentally dozens of times over the years until he almost believed it himself. But it had holes, lots of holes, and the investigators found every one of them. First, why didn't he call 911 if the baby had a fever? Why didn't he use the landline in the apartment? Ethan said the phone wasn't working. The forensics team confirmed the line had been deliberately cut, hours before the fire. Second, which pharmacy did he go to? Ethan said he couldn't remember the name, that he was too distraught to pay attention. Investigators checked every pharmacy within a 3-mile radius. None had a record of a sale to Ethan that night. No security camera showed him entering. Third, if he returned to find the building on fire, why is there no record of him in the firefighters' reports? No firefighter remembered a desperate man trying to get in. No witness saw him. The story began to crumble under the weight of its own inconsistencies. Julia, always more astute, tried a different approach in her initial interrogations. She said she had nothing to do with the fire, that she didn't even know Ethan at the time, that they only got involved months later when he sought her out, destroyed by his loss, needing someone who understood, that she fell in love with a devastated widower and tried to help him get back on his feet, that she knew nothing about insurance, fraud, or any plans. It was an almost believable version if it weren't for the details. If it weren't for the evidence the investigators showed her, social media photos, carefully archived by Sarah over the years, photos of Julia and Ethan together at restaurants, months before the fire, deleted but recovered posts, hotel check-ins, exchanged messages that Sarah had managed to recover from backups Ethan thought he had deleted. The timeline didn't lie. They were already together. They were already planning. The evidence was irrefutable, too solid to be questioned. The audio recorded by Robert on the night of the fire, where Ethan's voice, clear and cold, confessed the plan. The documents Sarah had gathered over 5 years, showing a pattern of behavior, planning, and meticulous execution. The witnesses who saw Ethan and Julia on the sidewalk that night, standing, watching, waiting. Robert, the firefighter who saved Sarah, who gave a detailed and emotional testimony about what he saw, what he heard, what he felt when he found a nearly unconscious mother shielding 2 babies with her own body. Neighbors who had been out of town that weekend but returned earlier than expected were located and confirmed they had seen Ethan tampering with the apartment windows the previous afternoon, sealing them with what looked like silicone. An employee from the gas company was called and confirmed that the valve had been manipulated in a way that only someone with technical knowledge could have done. Ethan had searched the internet weeks before, the investigators discovered in his browsing history, which he thought he had deleted but was saved on ISP servers, searches for how to cause a gas leak, how long it takes for a person to lose consciousness, the value of insurance policies, how to simulate domestic accidents. 3 days later, under overwhelming pressure from his lawyers, who realized there was no possible defense against so much evidence, and facing the evidence that was piling up, like an unstoppable avalanche, Ethan confessed, not all at once, not in a linear fashion, but little by little, in painful pieces torn out by force, like teeth being pulled without anesthesia, he admitted what he had done. Each confession was accompanied by pathetic justifications, attempts to minimize, to share the blame, to paint himself as a victim of circumstances. He said he was drowning in debts no one knew about. Gambling debts, debts to loan sharks, debts that threatened not only his reputation but his physical safety. That Julia convinced him it was the only way out, the only way to solve everything at once, to start clean, to have a second chance. That he had taken out the life insurance policy 6 months before the fire, increasing the initial value from $500,000 to $2 million after a long conversation with Julia, where she said that if something happened to Sarah and the babies, at least they would be financially protected. That he planned the fire for weeks, researching, studying, understanding every technical detail to make it look like an accident. He confessed that he disabled the smoke alarms 3 days before, telling Sarah they were faulty, and that he would call a technician the following week. That he discreetly loosened the gas pipe in the early hours of that Friday morning, when Sarah was sound asleep after an exhausting night caring for the crying babies, that he sealed the windows with clear silicone while she was at the supermarket with the boys on Saturday afternoon, saying he was doing preventative maintenance against leaks, that he changed the front door lock to one that locked from the outside, saying it was safer, that it would better protect the family, all planned, all executed with surgical coldness. He confessed that on the day of the fire, he left the house saying he was going to the bakery to buy bread and would be back in 20 minutes, that he went straight to the parking garage of the neighboring building where Julia was waiting for him in her car, a black sedan with tinted windows, that they stayed there, hidden but with a clear view of the building, waiting. That half an hour later, when they started to see smoke seeping from the window cracks, Julia smiled and said it was finally over, that he felt a tightness in his chest at that moment, a pang of regret, an impulse to run and open the door. But Julia grabbed his arm tightly and told him not to be weak, to think about their future, the money, the freedom. And he obeyed. He stood still, watching the smoke, imagining Sarah and the babies inside, and did nothing. He confessed that when the firefighters arrived, they ran off, went to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city where they hid for the entire night. That the next day, when the investigators called to say that Sarah and the babies had been found charred, Ethan felt relief. Relief. The word that would shock the entire country when the confession was leaked. He didn't feel horror. He didn't feel paralyzing guilt. He didn't fall to his knees begging God for forgiveness. He felt relief because it meant the plan had worked, that he was free, that the money would come, that the new life with Julia would finally begin. The word echoed across the country when the confession was leaked to the press. He felt relief knowing his wife and children had died. What kind of monster was this man? How could someone be so cold, so calculating, so devoid of humanity? Julia, seeing that Ethan had confessed, tried a different strategy. She claimed she was a victim too, that Ethan had manipulated her, that she didn't know the details, that when she realized what he had done, it was too late, and she was afraid to report him because he threatened to kill her too. It was a desperate attempt to reduce her sentence, to paint herself as a victim instead of a co-conspirator. But it didn't work. The evidence showed she had actively participated. She had suggested the insurance amount. She had chosen the date. She had been on the sidewalk that night, smiling. She was no victim, she was a perpetrator. The legal process was swift, considering the complexity of the case. The district attorney's office took on the prosecution with vigor. Experienced prosecutors, who had worked on heinous crime cases, dedicated themselves to building a solid, unshakable case. They used the audio recorded by Robert. They used the documents Sarah had gathered. They used the witness testimonies. They used the forensic reports that confirmed the fire was arson, not an accident, and they built a perfect case. The trial took place 4 months after the revelation at the hotel. It was held at the Cook County Criminal Courthouse, an old brick building in the heart of the city. The jury was selected carefully. 7 ordinary people who would have the power to decide the fate of Ethan and Julia. Sarah was present every day. She sat in the front row, always in black, always serious, always firm. The twins stayed with Robert, who had become a father figure to them over the years. He took them to the park, played with them, told them stories. He protected the children from the circus the trial had become. Ethan entered the courtroom on the first day wearing a dark suit, his hair cut, his posture stooped. He no longer looked like the arrogant, successful businessman. He looked like a broken, defeated man. Julia entered right behind him, heavy makeup trying to hide her dark circles, discreet clothes trying to appear humble. Both had expensive lawyers, paid with what was left of the company's money, which had gone bankrupt as soon as the scandal broke. Clients cancelled contracts, investors pulled their money, employees resigned. The empire collapsed in a matter of weeks. Ethan's lawyers tried to argue that he had acted under extreme emotional distress, that he was depressed, that he was not in full command of his mental faculties. They called psychiatrists who gave questionable reports. But the prosecution dismantled every argument. They showed that Ethan had planned everything with coldness, that he had taken out an insurance policy months before, that he had prepared the house, that he had lied to his wife, that he had waited on the sidewalk with his mistress. There was no emotion there. There was calculation, premeditation, pure evil. Julia's lawyers tried the victim line again. They said she was young, naive, manipulated by an older, more experienced man, but the prosecution showed her history, the other relationships with married men, the pattern, the ambition. Julia was not naive. She was a predator. Witnesses paraded through the court. Robert told how he found Sarah and the babies. Neighbors confirmed seeing Ethan and Julia on the sidewalk. Forensic experts explained how the fire was started. Co-workers revealed suspicious conversations. And Sarah, on the most difficult day of the trial, took the witness stand and told her story. She spoke about the years of trying to get pregnant, about the losses, about the joy when the twins were born, about the marriage that seemed perfect but was rotten on the inside, about the night of the fire, about the desperation of being locked in with her children, suffocating, banging on the doors, seeing Ethan on the other side doing nothing, about waking up in the hospital to discover she was officially dead, about the decision to disappear, about the 5 years raising her children alone, gathering evidence, planning her return, about the courage it took to walk into that ballroom and reveal the truth. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even some of the jurors were discreetly wiping away tears. Ethan didn't look at her. He kept his head down, his hands clasped in his lap. Julia was crying, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. On the last day of the trial, Ethan asked to speak. The judge allowed it. He stood up, his voice trembling, and apologized. He said he was sorry, that he had destroyed everything, that he deserved to be punished, that he just wanted Sarah to know that he had been a coward, weak, a monster, and that if he could go back in time he would do everything differently. Sarah looked him in the eye for the first time during the trial. "Your apology means nothing," she said, her voice firm. "You tried to kill me. You tried to kill our children, innocent people who trusted you. There is no forgiveness for that. There is only justice." The jury retired to deliberate. They spent 3 hours in the jury room, analyzing the evidence, debating, voting. When they returned, the foreman read the verdict. Ethan Miller, guilty of 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, guilty of insurance fraud, guilty of criminal conspiracy, guilty of money laundering, guilty of tax evasion. Julia Mendez, guilty of 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, guilty of insurance fraud, guilty of criminal conspiracy. The judge banged the gavel. Ethan was sentenced to 22 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. Julia was sentenced to 18 years, also in a maximum security facility. Both were taken immediately to serve their sentences. Ethan was sent to Stateville Correctional Center, a maximum security prison. Julia was sent to Logan Correctional Center. They lost all their assets. The company was liquidated to pay debts and damages. The luxury apartment was auctioned off. The cars were sold. The offshore accounts were frozen and confiscated. Nothing was left. They had lost everything. Sarah left the courthouse that day, feeling a huge weight lift from her shoulders, as if she had been carrying a backpack full of rocks for 5 years and could finally drop it. She was tired, exhausted beyond what words can describe. Every cell in her body craved rest, silence, peace. But she was also at peace. A peace she hadn't felt since before the fire. A peace that came from knowing she had done what she promised on that terrible night in the apartment bathroom, holding her babies while the world collapsed around her, when she swore that if they survived, she would come back to destroy the one who tried to destroy her. She had kept her promise. She had come back, and she had burned down the one who tried to burn her. The following weeks were a period of adjustment. Ethan's company was completely liquidated. Clients with active contracts demanded immediate termination and refunds of advance payments. The consulting firm's reputation, already in ruins, turned to dust. Employees who had been laid off when the scandal broke sued for emotional distress and unpaid wages. The luxury apartment in the upscale neighborhood was auctioned off for well below market value because no one wanted to live where criminals had lived. The imported cars were sold off quickly. The offshore bank accounts frozen by international anti-money laundering agencies had all their funds confiscated and repatriated to the United States, where they were used to pay damages to the victims of the corporate fraud Ethan had committed over the years. Julia lost not only her freedom, but also any shred of dignity she had left. At Logan Correctional Center, she was isolated from other inmates for the first few months because her case was so high profile that there was a real risk of retaliation. Women imprisoned for far less serious crimes hated people like Julia. Mothers who were there for stealing to feed their children had no pity for someone who tried to kill babies for money. She was gradually integrated into the general population, but always lived on the margins, shunned, despised, and alone. Her punishment went beyond prison. It was complete social ostracism. Ethan, in the men's prison, met a similar fate. Criminals have their own hierarchy, their own codes, and at the top of the list of those who deserve punishment within the prison walls are those who commit crimes against children. Ethan was a constant target. He had to request a transfer to protective custody 3 times in the first year. He lived in isolation, in fear, constantly looking over his shoulder. The arrogance had completely vanished. What was left was a broken, terrified man, counting the endless days of a sentence that seemed like it would never end. Sarah, finally free of Helen Costa, officially became Sarah Miller again. Her documents were restored through a swift legal process, handled by a judge who was moved by her story and wanted to help. She regained her identity, her social security number, her professional license as a psychologist. She existed in the system again, and with that official existence came a significant amount of money. The life insurance policy that Ethan had fraudulently collected was returned in full with interest, $2,400,000, dirty money that would now be used for good. Sarah didn't want to spend the money on herself. It felt wrong. So she invested it in creating a non-profit organization. She called it the Fresh Start Institute, an organization dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence, women who needed to rebuild their lives, mothers fighting alone, survivors who needed a safe place to get back on their feet. She rented a large house in a residential neighborhood in Chicago. She hired psychologists, lawyers, social workers. She created a project that provided temporary shelter, free legal guidance, specialized psychological support, vocational courses, and help finding jobs and housing. Sarah's story inspired hundreds, thousands of women to report their abusers, to leave abusive relationships, to start over. She received stacks of letters every day, emotional, grateful, desperate, hopeful letters. She read every one. She answered as many as she could. Some stories were so similar to hers it hurt. Others were even worse. But they all had one thing in common: strong women who deserved to live without fear, without violence, without having to hide. Robert was waiting at the courthouse door with Michael and Gabriel, one on each side, holding his hands. When they saw their mother, the boys ran to her. Sarah knelt and hugged them, holding them, tight, smelling their hair, feeling the warmth of their little bodies, the certainty that it had all been worth it. Everything had been worth it. "Mummy, why are you crying?" Michael asked, touching her wet face. Sarah smiled, wiping away the tears. "They're happy tears, my love. Mummy is just very happy." Gabriel kissed her cheek. "We're happy too." And they left together, mother and sons, survivors, victors, heading toward a new beginning that was finally real. 2 years had passed since the trial. 2 years that felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. Sarah was sitting in her office at the Fresh Start Institute, a large welcoming room on the 2nd floor of the house that served as the project's headquarters. The walls were painted in soft shades of blue and green, colors the psychologist in her knew conveyed calm and security. There were plants scattered in the corners, a comfortable couch where women could sit and cry without fear of judgment, and a light wood desk where piles of files, reports, and letters awaited her attention. It was 9 in the morning on a sunny Saturday in October. Sarah had woken up early, as always made coffee, taken Michael and Gabriel to their soccer practice where they would spend the whole morning chasing a ball with other boys their age, and then came straight to the institute. There was an important meeting scheduled soon. a new woman who needed help. A story that would probably be painful to hear, as they all were, but one that Sarah was ready to embrace. The Fresh Start Institute had become a national reference in less than 2 years. It started small, serving 5 women in the first month, then 10, then 20. Word of mouth worked, better than any advertising could. Women told their friends, friends told their cousins, cousins told their neighbors. The news that there was a place in Chicago where victims of domestic violence could find not just temporary shelter, but a complete support network to rebuild their entire lives spread like wildfire. Sarah hired an exceptional team, 3 psychologists specializing in trauma, 2 lawyers who worked pro bono, driven by the desire to make a real difference, a social worker with 20 years of experience, who knew exactly which resources to access, which government programs to activate, which doors to knock on, an arts and crafts teacher who gave weekly workshops, teaching the women to make products that were later sold at fairs, generating income, a volunteer personal trainer who came twice a week to teach self-defense classes, not only teaching physical techniques, but also giving the women back the feeling that they had power over their own bodies. The house had 6 bedrooms upstairs, each able to accommodate a mother with up to 2 children. Sarah made sure that each room was private, a space where women could feel safe without having to share with strangers in their most vulnerable moments. Each room had a comfortable bed, a wardrobe, a nightstand with a lamp, and blackout curtains for those who needed to sleep during the day. The walls were painted in soft, relaxing colors. There was a shared bathroom for every 2 rooms, always clean, always stocked with toiletries. On the ground floor, beside Sarah's office, there was a large, welcoming kitchen where the women could cook together, share recipes, and teach each other dishes from their hometowns. There was a living room with soft couches, a television, and shelves full of books. There was a playroom for the children with games, dolls, cars, colored pencils, and endless paper. And there was a backyard with a well-kept lawn, a small community garden where the women grew herbs and vegetables, and a swing set where the children spent hours playing. The women stayed for as long as they needed. Some stayed for just a week, long enough to get a restraining order, organize their documents, and go live with relatives in another city. Others stayed for months, needing more time to strengthen themselves psychologically, to take vocational courses, to save money to rent their own place. There was no rush, no pressure, no judgment about how much time each one needed. The important thing was that when they left strong, prepared, with concrete life plans and an established support network, so they wouldn't be left helpless again. Sarah funded everything with the insurance money and with donations that started pouring in after her story captivated the nation. Sympathetic business owners sent checks. Ordinary women started GoFundMe campaigns. Even celebrities began to offer support, posting about the Institute on social media and asking for contributions. Money was not an issue, and Sarah used every penny with obsessive responsibility, providing public accountability, showing exactly where every dollar was invested. But more than the money, more than the physical structure, more than the competent team, what made the Fresh Start Institute work was Sarah. Her presence, her story, her ability to look into the eyes of a broken woman and say, with the authority of someone who had lived through hell and back, "You will survive, you will rise again, you will win." And the women believed her. Because if Sarah could do it, after everything she had been through, after being locked in a burning apartment, being declared dead, living in hiding, for 5 years gathering evidence and facing the man who tried to kill her in a packed courtroom, then anyone could. Anyone could start over. There was a knock on the office door. Sarah looked up from her papers. "Come in." The door opened slowly. A woman entered. She looked to be in her mid-30s with brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail, simple but clean clothes, and in her arms a little girl of about 3 who clung to her mother's neck as if it were the only solid thing in a shaking world. The woman had a black eye poorly concealed by heavy makeup. Her lower lip was swollen, and on her left wrist the marks of fingers. Sarah stood up, making a point to come out from behind her desk. She didn't want any barriers between them. She walked over to the woman, smiling gently. "Hi, my name is Sarah, welcome." The woman took a deep breath as if gathering the courage to speak. "I'm Jessica, and this is my daughter, Julia. Sarah felt a pang in her chest upon hearing the name Julia, not out of anger, not anymore, but because of the ever-present memory of what that name had represented in her life. She pushed the thought away. This Julia was an innocent child. She had nothing to do with the other one. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. Shall we sit? Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Some juice for Julia?" Jessica shook her head. "I just want to know if you can help me. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no one. And if I go back home, he'll kill me this time. I'm sure of it." Sarah took her hand, squeezing it lightly. "You're not going back. You're safe now. And we're going to help you with everything, housing, documents, a job, but first let's take care of you, okay?" Jessica started to cry, silent tears that streamed down her bruised face. "Why do you do this? Why do you help people you don't even know?" Sarah smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Because someone helped me when I needed it, and because no one deserves to live in fear. No one deserves to be beaten. No one deserves to be a prisoner in their own home. You deserve a fresh start, Jessica, and your daughter deserves to grow up seeing her mother strong, free, and happy." Jessica nodded, still crying. Sarah called one of the psychologists, Camilla, who entered the office with a welcoming smile and took Jessica and little Julia to one of the vacant rooms upstairs. Sarah remained there alone in her office, looking out the window at the quiet street below. Trees swayed in the wind. Children played on the sidewalk. Life was happening, normal, everyday, beautiful in its simplicity. She thought about how many Jessicas there were out there. How many women at that very moment were being beaten, humiliated, locked up, controlled. How many children were growing up in environments of terror, learning that violence was normal, that love hurt, that family was synonymous with fear. And she thought about how impossible it was to save them all. But how every single one that was saved mattered. Every Jessica, every little Julia, every transformed life was a victory against the darkness. Robert appeared at the office door at that moment, knocking lightly on the frame. "Can I come in?" Sarah turned and smiled. "Of course. What brings you here?" Robert entered, sat in the chair across from her. "Desk?" He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, his grey hair cut short. He was 60 now, had retired from the fire department the previous year, but he was still vibrant, full of energy, full of purpose. "I came to bring you this," he said, placing a thick envelope on the desk. "Donations I managed to collect from the Firefighters Union. $5,000. They want to help." Sarah picked up the envelope, moved. "Robert, you never stop, always doing more." He shrugged. "I learned from you that we never do enough as long as there are still people suffering. Besides, I have plenty of time on my hands now that I'm retired. I need to keep myself useful." Sarah laughed. "Useful? You practically live here. You help with everything. You fix what's broken. You pick up donations. You give talks at schools about fire prevention and home safety. You're more than useful, Robert. You're essential." He was silent for a moment, looking at his calloused hands. "You know, Sarah, sometimes I think about that night. The night that changed everything. If I had followed protocol, if I hadn't gone in when I heard the crying, you and the boys would have really died. And all of this," he gestured around, indicating the institute, "all of this wouldn't exist. All these women you've helped wouldn't have been helped." Sarah felt her eyes sting. "I think about that too. I think about how life is made of small decisions that have giant consequences. You decided not to follow protocol. You decided to trust your gut. You decided to take a risk. And you saved 3 lives that day. But you saved so much more than that, Robert. You saved all the lives that those 3 lives touched." Afterward, they sat there in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, until Robert stood up. "Well, I'll let you get back to work. Are the boys doing well?" "They're great. Growing up way too fast. Sometimes I look at them and can't believe they're the same tiny babies from the NICU." "Do they know about their father, about everything?" Sarah shook her head. "Not yet. I'll tell them when they turn 10, when they're mature enough to process it without it destroying them. For now they just know their father isn't around, and that they have a mother who loves them more than anything in the world. Robert nodded. You're doing the right thing, I have no doubt. After he left, Sarah returned to her work. She had reports to finish, calls to make, meetings to schedule. The institute didn't run itself. But she loved it. She loved the feeling of building something bigger than herself, something that would continue to exist long after she was gone, a legacy of kindness born from pain. In the afternoon, when she picked up Michael and Gabriel from soccer practice, they both came running, sweaty, smiling, shouting, "Mom! Mom! I scored 3 goals. No, I scored 4. Sarah hugged them both at the same time, inhaling the scent of childhood, of clean sweat, of pure happiness. They still looked so much alike, even at 7. The same features, the same expressive eyes, the same wide smiles. But their personalities were completely different. Michael was quieter, more observant. He liked to read and draw. Gabriel was explosive, talkative, full of energy that seemed endless. On the way home, Gabriel asked, "Mom, is it true that you help women who get hit by their husbands?" Sarah looked in the rearview mirror, seeing his reflection in the back seat. "Yes, it is. Why?" "Because our teacher talked about you today. She said you're a hero. She said you help a lot of people." Michael added, "And Beatrice from our class said her aunt stayed at your institute when she ran away from her boyfriend, and now her aunt is doing great. She has a job and everything." Sarah felt her chest tighten with pride and emotion. "I'm not a hero, my loves. I just do what everyone should do. Help those who need it." "But not everyone helps," Gabriel said, with that precocious wisdom that children sometimes have. "So you're special," Sarah smiled. "You're the special ones. You two are the reason for everything I do." That night, after dinner, after helping with homework, after baths and pajamas, after reading stories and giving goodnight kisses, Sarah stood at the door of the boys' room watching them sleep. She thought about how different they were from the premature babies she almost lost 7 years ago. She thought about everything that had happened since then. The attempted murder, the rescue, the fake death, the years in hiding, the infiltration of the company, the public revelation, the trial, the conviction, the creation of the institute, the hundreds of lives transformed, and she thought of Ethan rotting in a cell, paying for his crimes. She thought of Julia, isolated and hated in the women's prison, living the ostracism she had created for herself. She felt no pity, no anger. She felt only indifference. They were the past, turned pages, closed chapters. The present was here. It was Michael and Gabriel breathing peacefully in their beds, which were now big kid beds. It was the Fresh Start Institute full of women rebuilding their lives. It was waking up every day with a purpose. It was knowing that the pain she had lived through was not in vain, because it had become fuel to help others not to suffer alone. 3 months later, Sarah was invited to give a talk at DePaul University. The auditorium was packed. 400 people, mostly young women, students of psychology, law, and social work. Sarah walked onto the stage feeling the familiar butterflies in her stomach that she always felt before public speaking. But it was a good feeling, a feeling that meant it mattered, that she had something important to say. "Good evening," she began, her firm voice echoing through the auditorium via the microphone. "My name is Sarah Miller, and 7 years ago my husband tried to kill me." The silence that followed was absolute. All side conversations stopped. All attention turned to her. For the next 40 minutes, Sarah told her story. She omitted nothing. She told them about trying to get pregnant, the losses, the premature twins. She told them about the betrayal, about Julia, about the life insurance. She told them about the night of the fire with details that made people in the audience gasp in horror. She told them about Robert's rescue, the decision to disappear, the 5 years gathering evidence. She told them about the revelation, the trial, the conviction. And she told them about the Fresh Start Institute, about the women she helped, about the transformation of pain into purpose. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. People stood up. Many were crying. Sarah saw emotional faces, red eyes, expressions of admiration and respect. During the Q&A session, a student raised her hand. "How did you manage to forgive?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I didn't forgive. At least, not in the way people imagine. Forgiveness. I didn't forget. I didn't excuse it. I didn't say it's okay. But I let go. I let go of the rage that was consuming me. I let go of the hatred that was poisoning me. Because carrying that was keeping me tied to him. And I didn't want to be tied anymore. I wanted to be free, so I let go, not for him. For me." Another question. What would you say to a woman who is experiencing domestic violence right now? Sarah looked directly at the camera that was filming the talk for a live stream. "I would say this. You are not alone. You do not deserve this. It is not your fault. And you can get out. I know it seems impossible. I know you're scared. I know he said he'll find you, that he'll hurt you, that no one will believe you. But I believe you. We believe you. And there are places that can help you. The Fresh Start Institute is one of them, but there are many others across the country. Police departments, shelters, non-profits, people willing to extend a hand. You just have to take that hand, take the first step. Because after the first one, the others get easier, and one day you'll look back and you won't believe the strength you had, the courage you had. You will be proud. I promise. The video of the talk went viral. In a week, it had 2 million views. In a month, 5 million. Thousands of comments from women thanking her, telling their own stories, saying they were inspired, that they reported their abusers, that they left, that they started over. Sarah's speech had touched an exposed nerve in American society. It had sparked conversations about domestic violence at dinner tables, among friends on television shows, and the Fresh Start Institute had to expand. Sarah rented a second house, then a third. She created a network of volunteers in other cities, Milwaukee, Madison, Minneapolis, Detroit, Cleveland, small cells of the Institute, operating with the same philosophy, the same care, the same purpose. On a Sunday morning, 4 years after the trial, Sarah woke up to Michael and Gabriel entering her room, one on each side of the bed, serious expressions on their little faces. "Mum, we need to talk," Michael said. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart clenching. "About what?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "We want to know about our dad, for real. Not the story you tell us, the truth." Sarah felt the world stop. They were 9 now. She had planned to tell them at 10. But maybe they were ready. Maybe it was time. "Okay. Let's have breakfast and I'll tell you everything. But it's a hard story. Are you sure you want to know?" They both nodded, resolute. They had inherited her determination, her strength. They were ready. After breakfast, sitting in the living room with the soft morning light streaming through the windows, Sarah told them. She told them everything. She adapted the language for their age, omitted the most violent details, but she didn't lie. She said their father had tried to hurt her and them, that he had done very bad things, that he was in prison, that he would probably be in prison for many more years. The boys were silent when she finished, processing, digesting, trying to fit that brutal truth into their worldview. Finally, Gabriel asked, "Is he a bad man?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "He did very bad things, but I don't know if he's bad deep in his soul, or if he made terrible choices that led him down a dark path. The important thing is for you to know that none of this was your fault. You were babies, innocent, and you have within you the ability to choose to be different, to be good, kind, fair." Michael, always the more thoughtful one, asked, "Are you afraid we'll be like him?" Sarah pulled them into a tight hug. "No, because you've already shown who you are. You're caring with your friends, kind to animals, thoughtful with people who are hurting. You have big hearts, and that doesn't come from your father. That comes from you, from the choices you make every day." The boys seemed relieved, and after that day they never brought it up again. They knew the truth, and the truth, as painful as it was better than the doubt. The years continued to pass. The Fresh Start Institute celebrated its 5th anniversary. It had helped over 1,200 women, 1,200 transformed lives. Children who grew up in safe environments because of the work of Sarah and her team. Women who were able to start over, work, study, and smile again. Sarah was honored by the city of Chicago. She received awards from human rights organizations. She was on the cover of magazines. She gave interviews on national television shows. But she didn't let the fame go to her head. She kept working. She continued to personally meet with every woman who knocked on the Institute's door. She remained just Sarah, the psychologist who understood, who welcomed, who didn't judge. Robert remained by her side, helping with everything, being the father figure Michael and Gabriel needed, being the loyal friend Sarah deserved. On a particularly difficult day, when one of the women from the Institute went back to her abusive husband, despite all their efforts to convince her otherwise, Robert found Sarah crying in her office. "You can't save everyone," he said, sitting beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know," Sarah replied, wiping her tears, "but it hurts every time one goes back. It hurts to know she might not get a second chance. But you gave her the first chance, and if she ever wants to leave again, she'll know she has a place to go. That's already a lot." Sarah nodded. Robert was right. She couldn't save them all, but she could keep trying. She could keep opening doors, extending hands, lighting candles in the dark. On a sunny Sunday in November, 10 years after the fire that changed everything, Sarah was at Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most beautiful parks, with Michael and Gabriel. The boys were 12 now, almost teenagers, growing up too fast, their voices starting to change, their bodies stretching out, their personalities becoming more defined. They were playing soccer with other neighborhood kids on a makeshift field on the grass, shouting, laughing, sweating, completely absorbed in the simple, perfect universe of being. Our kid playing on a sunny day. Sarah sat on a wooden bench under the generous shade of an old tree, watching her sons, savoring this moment of simplicity that she had learned to value more than anything. A woman approached. She looked to be in her 40s, with a short modern haircut, sunglasses and casual but high-quality clothes. There was something about her that exuded confidence, security, success. She sat on the bench next to Sarah without asking, as if they were old friends. "You're Sarah Miller, aren't you?" Sarah turned, trying to place the woman. "I am." The woman took off her sunglasses, revealing light eyes and an emotional smile. She extended her hand. "My name is Jessica. We met 8 years ago. I had a black eye, a swollen lip, finger marks on my wrist, and a little girl named Julia in my arms." Sarah's eyes widened, the memory flooding back. "Jessica? Oh my God! Of course! How are you? How is Julia?" Jessica's smile grew even wider. "I'm great. Really great. Better than I ever imagined possible on that day I walked terrified into your office. I finished the business degree I started through the courses the Institute offered. I graduated 3 years ago. I'm working as a financial manager at a tech company here in Chicago. I make good money. I have my own apartment. Small, but it's mine. My daughter Julia is 11 now, going to a good school, getting excellent grades, taking ballet, happy, safe, with no real memory of those bad times because she was so little. And I came here today because I saw you from a distance with your sons, and I had to stop and thank you. Because if it weren't for you, if it weren't for the Institute, if it weren't for those months I spent there rebuilding myself piece by piece, I would be dead. I am absolutely sure of it. My ex-husband would have killed me in the next fight. It was just a matter of time." Sarah felt hot tears well up in her eyes. She took Jessica's hand and squeezed it tightly. "You saved yourself, Jessica. You were the one who had the courage to leave that situation. You accepted help. You did the hard work of rebuilding. I just helped open the door. But you were the one who walked through it." Jessica shook her head, her eyes also welling up. "You did so much more than that. You gave me my whole life back. You gave me back the hope I thought I had lost forever. You showed me that I had value, that I deserved better, that I wasn't the trash my ex-husband said I was. And I wanted you to know, really know deep in your soul, that it wasn't in vain. That every minute you dedicate to that institute is worth it. that every woman you help is an entire life that is transformed. It's a child who will grow up without trauma. It's a family that rebuilds. It's a future that opens up. You saved my life, Sarah, and I will never forget it. The two women hugged right there on the park bench under the shade of the tree, while in the distance, Sarah's sons shouted in celebration of a goal. Two women who had survived hell, who refused to be just victims, who chose to rise, rebuild and win, and who now, years later, could look each other in the eye and see not just the pain they shared, but the strength they had discovered. That night, lying in bed, the house silent and her boys asleep in their rooms, Sarah thought about the journey. She thought about the woman she was 10 years ago. Fragile, insecure Sarah, living in a fake marriage, unaware of the storm that was about to break over her. She thought about the woman who almost died in that apartment, suffocating, terrified. She thought about Helen Costa, the false identity she had to use to survive. And she thought about the Sarah of now, strong, firm, whole. She had scars, physical and emotional, her neck marked by the fire, her soul marked by betrayal and violence. But the scars didn't define her. They were just part of the story, chapters she had survived and overcome. She got up slowly, went to the boys' room. She opened the door a crack. Michael was sleeping on his side, hugging his pillow. Gabriel was sleeping on his back, one arm thrown over his head. Sarah stood there, watching, feeling that immense love that only mothers understand. A love so big, it hurts. A love that makes you capable of anything. She whispered softly, knowing they wouldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. Thank you for making me strong enough. Thank you for being the reason for everything. She closed the door slowly and went back to her room. She lay down and, for the first time in many years, slept without dreaming. She slept in complete peace. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Sarah, Michael, and Gabriel has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of new beginnings, courage, and justice, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, the strength of motherhood and the power of resilience. We'll see you in the next episode.